Hi, my name's Travis Miner, and on behalf of Open Door Education, I'm here to share 7 simple tips to help you prepare for the math section of the new digital SAT. Tip number 1, the answers are part of the question. Before you start doing any math, creating equations, plugging things in, take a moment to look at the answer choices. Assuming this is a multiple choice question, you're going to notice some patterns. Maybe all of the answers are equations, or all of them are XY coordinate points, or all of them are individual numbers. Well, the nature of the answer choices is going to tell us something about what we need to do. Is our goal to create an equation? Or maybe we can even use the answer choices to plug them in and test them out. Before you start doing any work, make sure you know what both the nature of your answer choices are, as well as the sort of format or commonalities that they might share. Tip number 2, ask yourself, can I just use Desmos? The new Desmos calculator, which is built into the SAT's testing platform, is a remarkably powerful tool. It's going to allow students to solve a significant number of questions without actually having to do any math by hand. And in some cases, it's really a matter of recognizing I can plug this into Desmos. When I take a look at what Desmos shows me, I can see my answer right there on the graph. This new SAT is testing in part how well can students use this tool now that it's available for all questions. So before you start doing a lot of math by hand or going through any drawn out steps to solve a problem, take a moment and say, could I just use Desmos? A lot of the time, the answer will be yes. Tip number 3, show your work. Now, when I was a math student in high school, I hated to show my work, and I wasn't very good at doing that. But what I found was when I did take the time to do it, I was a better student because I could see what I'd done, I could find and fix mistakes, and especially if I wanted to come back to that problem later on, I had left myself some crumbs so I could see what did I do and how did I do it. One of the most common mistakes I see students make is that they recognize how to solve a problem and then they start doing the math really quickly. They're doing a lot of it in their heads. Sometimes they're doing multiple steps in their heads at the same time. For some students, this works out. For a lot of us, this sets us up to make careless errors with signs or distribution or writing down a number incorrectly because we remembered it incorrectly. So the takeaway for students is when you start actually doing some calculations, rearranging an equation, plugging some numbers in, take the time to write out each step. It doesn't get you any extra points on the test, but it does allow you to go back later on and check your work. Or if you get an answer that doesn't match any of the answer choices, you can then go back and see, well, what were each of my steps? Can I find a mistake? And in many cases, you can fix it, and then you arrive at the correct answer with a much easier process than if you were trying to do all of this in your head. Tip number 4, plug it in. There are so many opportunities on the SAT to take a individual number, or sometimes it's an XY coordinate pair, and plug it into another equation. That's one of the most important skills that the SAT is testing. Do we recognize that this number we've been given or this coordinate we've been given is actually a solution to this equation, and we can plug it right in? When you are given several separate pieces of information, maybe one of them's an equation and then a value for x or a value for x and y, the first thing we should ask ourselves, outside of can I use Desmos, is can I plug these numbers in? Do these numbers go into or go with this equation? In a lot of cases, you can also do this with your answer choices. So look for opportunities to plug things in. In many cases, that is the most effective and efficient way to solve the problems you're encountering. Tip number 5, make assumptions. Now, in math, we are generally told that we shouldn't make assumptions. We should focus on what we know to be true, and that is indeed good advice for the SAT. However, every now and then, a student gets stuck on a problem because there's something that they think is true, but they can't quite remember why it's true or how they know that it's true. This happens with geometry a lot, especially because students tend to be rusty on that content area. If you're working on a problem, you're stuck, you don't see another path to the answer choice, and you think to yourself, well, if I did make that assumption, I would then be able to do the math and arrive at an answer. go for it. If you don't see another better path and there's an assumption that you want to make, chances are there's a good reason you want to make that assumption. Maybe there's something that you learned many years back that you don't remember exactly what it was, but it's giving you enough of a hint that it allows you to solve that problem. Go for it. It's far better to do that than to sit there spinning your wheels and ultimately missing the question. Tip number 6, be careful with signs and distribution. The most common errors that I see students make on the SAT, the ACT, standardized tests of all shapes and sizes relate to distributing numbers and signs. In many cases, it's a little bit of both. Maybe you have to distribute a number and the negative sign that goes with it. Anytime you're working with a problem that involves negatives or negative coefficients, be extra careful with your operations. And if you get an answer that doesn't match any of the answer choices, the first thing to go back and check is, are my signs correct? And did I do my distribution correct? Tip number 7, remember, the math section of the SAT is a reading section. The math section of the SAT is different from a lot of other math test students might have taken, where it's really focused on just the numbers, the calculations, the operations. In many cases, the SAT is going to provide crucial information in sentences and with specific words or phrasing, as opposed to just saying, here's this equation, please solve it. For example, if they say that a graph passes through the origin, we know that means it passes through the point 0, 0. In other cases, they might reference an intercept. When they reference an intercept, we know that either x is 0 or y is 0. So in all of these questions, there's this common theme of telling us math information, but using words rather than numbers to do it. So keep in mind, we need to read carefully and ask ourselves, does this sentence give me any relevant or helpful math information? And we should also check, before you put down your answer, did I answer the question that is actually being asked? It's very common that the SAT might set us up to solve for X, and then they ask, what's Y or what's 2X? So in addition to making sure we read that question carefully and garner all of the math information that's available, we also want to make sure that we are actually answering the question that we are being asked. I hope these tips are helpful in getting you started on the math section of the digital SAT. For more tips and more advice on general best practices for preparation, visit us online at www.opendoor.education. Thank you so much.